Okay, well, let me officially welcome you. So my name is Karen McGuire, and I am responsible for the local employment and economic development program here at the OECD. And I'm really pleased to welcome you to this webinar today. It's part of our local development forum, so a forum to help access OECD knowledge and have global debates open to all. So I just wanted to say that you're free to join in the discussion, so don't hesitate to say in the chat where you're calling in from, where you're listening in from. And as we have opportunities for questions, you'll see in Zoom, many of you are likely familiar with the question and answer function to ask questions. So the setup for today, next slide, is just we're going to have some opening comments. So I will kick it off, and then we'll have Tanya Braga, head of Olympic Games Impact and Legacy from the International Olympic Committee, say a few words. Then we'll pop over to Martha Bloom, who is going to present the new guides that are being launched by the OECD. And then, as you see, we have quite an esteemed group of panelists that we will then turn to for an interactive discussion about how to get the most local impact from these global events. So to kick it off, just to mention that this work on global events and local development is part of the program, and has been for several years, because there's always been a question of, when we hold these big events, how do we get the most local impact? So this has been the topic of a number of OECD reports. And then as this developed, it became important to say, how do we make this really high level and visible? And so this led to a recommendation by the OECD in 2018. And again, I'd like to thank France for helping also to spearhead politically this within the OECD, in order to have this official OECD recommendation on global events and local development, to show that all sorts of ministries should be thinking about how to achieve this in all levels of government. And what we mean by global events, well, we mean sort of any event that has some form of a global reach, has some form of, public investment and an impact on people and the built environment. And we really think about what is the impact and legacy of the events, whether it's planned or unplanned. We need to kind of keep track of both of those. And so we have an online toolkit for those who are interested in following the recommendation and applying it in their communities. And today we're launching a couple of guides that are actually going to contribute then to this further guidance that's available today. And these two guides are really the fruit of an extensive two-year consultation process. So over 170 different organizations helped us with this. They were in different workshops we held, or responding to a stakeholder survey. Governments from 20 different countries, past and future event hosts, academic experts, international organizations and associations. And so we'd really like to thank all of those who are helped participate in the development of these guides. And that we're really thinking about not just impacts the day or the week of the event, but what do we see years down the line, and what kind of transformational change can some of these events achieve? Some of the takeaways I took when we did the consultation for this work is really that the choice of indicators and who's involved and how they are tracked is a very important consensus building element, and can even start in the pre-bidding phase before you're even getting to executing an event. And really, this is important to think about how we can be clear and build international evidence, so that we're realistic on what are the types of impacts and the degree of those impacts that we can achieve in different areas: economic, social, environmental. And also, what's interesting to share are the lessons learned. So we have indicators, we want to measure impact, but sometimes what helps us is learning what happened along the way, and what was the roadblock that we faced, and how we overcome it to achieve those impacts. So again, a special thanks to the International Olympic Committee, and in particularly Tanya Braga with us today, who helped partner with us on this important work. And so I am going to now turn to Martha Bloom to give a little overview presentation before then turning to Tanya for some remarks. So Martha, please, the floor is yours. You could unmute Martha, there you go. Martha, I don't think you're unmuted.
Hi, apologies. So hopefully now everyone can hear me and see my slides at the same time. Excellent, great. So first hiccup of the workshop is over. I'll take the hit for everyone else. Hopefully everyone else will be smooth from now on. So thanks so much, Karen, for introducing this work. I'm really pleased to be launching these two guides today, and just to echo Karen's thanks to all those who took part in the consultation and really helped to build this work. So global events are increasingly recognised as catalysts for development. And as Karen mentioned, it's not just big events like the Olympic and Paralympic Games, but also smaller events like cultural festivals, small sort of community festivals, small trade fairs, regional championships. And within this context of increased interest in events, I'd like to begin by exploring a little bit about why we at the OECD are doing this work specifically on measurement. What gap does it fill, and what does it hope to achieve? So we know that events have a significant impact on local, national, and even international communities. And pretty much every event will conduct some form of assessment of some of the impacts that that event has, right? The issue is that there is a real lack of consistency in the approaches to measuring that impact. Events measure different things, and even when they measure the same things, they often do it in different ways. So this makes it really challenging to firstly compare between events, both between events of different types, but also between the same event over time or the same event in different locations. And that then means that it's difficult to identify what works, and almost more importantly, what doesn't work, right? Which then hampers the ability to learn from past mistakes and to improve practice. So what this work is trying to do is to consolidate the huge amount of great advice and guidance and good practice that is out there, and to build on this work. So also through the extensive consultation period, which Karen mentioned, to try to develop some sort of consensus around some common approaches to impact measurement, which can be applicable to any type of event. So how do we do this? Well, the first of our two guides explains how to conduct impact assessment. So it gives this overview of different approaches, different indicators that can be used, different econometric modelling techniques, different qualitative approaches, but also in general, some of the challenges, the debates, the issues, the discussions. So how do you incorporate consideration of negative impacts into assessment? How do you capture wider benefits on local development beyond just GDP contribution? It also proposes some actions that event hosts can take to produce more effective impact assessments, and I'll come on to some of those in a moment. And then Guide 2 develops this work a little bit further by proposing a framework of indicators for economic, social, and environmental impact of events. Alongside presenting this framework, it offers some practical guidance. So what kind of data are needed? How can that data be collected? How to report on these indicators, as well as some of the overarching considerations that are applicable to all of the indicators. So, for example, how do you determine what constitutes a local area when you're measuring local impact? What are the pitfalls to avoid in designing audience surveys so that they can be compared against official data sets, this sort of thing. It also offers a whole range of examples of tools and further resources which event hosts can draw on in implementing the framework. So going into a little bit more detail now on the content of the two guides, I wanted to highlight some of the actions that I spoke about a moment ago from Guide 1. So firstly, what came out really strongly in the consultations was this need for co-creation. So we know the public sector alone can't deliver a large-scale event. Even for small-scale events, you need buy-in from local citizens, you need buy-in from the public sector. So this means involving stakeholders, key stakeholders, not just in event delivery, but co-creation means really promoting community member involvement, as well as other stakeholder groups, from the planning and development of the event, to really have a voice in what impacts are measured and how they're measured. And this is especially important as we know that events have uneven impacts across different population groups, right? So having key stakeholders around the table in the design and the implementation of an impact assessment strategy can really help to identify early on what some of these different impacts might be and help to continue to monitor them throughout the event life cycle. So in this regard, in a similar vein, we'll also strongly encourage the use of qualitative evidence. So, at the OECD, we're often known for our quantitative assessments of things, but even within our organisation, we are acutely aware of the importance of qualitative evidence in offering some nuance to lots of these big headline numbers. In fact, one of the most interesting trends that we see in this impact measurement is a shift towards incorporation of more qualitative data, case study approaches, more interview data, that sort of thing. And qualitative data is also really useful for evidencing change. And this is another major recommendation of the work, is we advise to establish a clear theory of change from the very beginning of the event life cycle. So it's not just, oh, we'll host an event and we will, this will magically create new jobs and will increase tourism, but actually, how will this happen? Does there need to be additional investment in skills training? Does there need to be a new place branding approach? What will actually need to happen to lead from the input of hosting an event to the output of the intended impact at the end? Moreover, how do these intended impacts fit within wider policy agendas? For example, in health, in education, in housing, a theory of change can help to sort of situate the agenda of those impacts within broader debates. It can also help to align all the different stakeholders involved in events so that everyone is working towards shared goals and understands the impact they are hoping to achieve. And then finally, I really can't stress this enough, the importance of early planning. Karen mentioned this in her introduction as well. So in relation to which indicators will be used, how they'll be broken down, which data are needed, and especially here, the development of a data strategy from the very beginning of the process. So this is particularly important where baseline data is needed, but also in identifying data gaps. So we heard in one of our workshops from Brisbane 2032 Olympic and Paralympic Games Committee how they already this far out from the games had identified where they had data gaps that they needed to start filling now in order to be able to conduct the impact measurement that they wanted in almost sort of 10 years time or however long, right? So this prior planning is really important. It's also important that is then incorporated into things like contracting models, right? So if you are, for example, outsourcing waste management, what data will need to be collected by the waste management company in order for you to be able to monitor your recycling commitments? How will they share this data? How can you respect data collection regulations whilst also making this data available for assessors? So there's a whole host of quite complex issues. And so starting to think about these things early is really, really crucial. And starting to identify impact indicators early is incredibly helpful in this regard. Which brings us on nicely to the work of the second guide and the common indicator framework it develops. So I'm conscious of time, so I'll move fairly swiftly through the second bit. But the indicator framework that we propose, as mentioned, is based around economic, environmental and social impact of events. We propose a set of 9 core indicators, which we found to be the most commonly used or were viewed as the most important metrics for measuring the impact of events. as well as 9 additional indicators, which are either less commonly used or are more complex to implement, but are still viewed as highly important in capturing the benefits specifically for local development. It's really important for me to stress here that this list is non-exhaustive. So all events will have their own unique context. They'll have different capacities and different impact ambitions. And we fully support that. They should. What we're hoping that this list can offer is a set of sort of core indicators that can be incorporated within broader assessment strategies to enable some level of consistency across events, whilst also allowing for that flexibility in impact ambitions. So very quickly, we know on the economic indicators, we know that they don't just include the net economic impact on the host economy, although of course this is important and this indicator is in there, but the impact or the economic impact also includes specific indicators on job creation, on skills development, and on those longer term tourist trends, longer term tourism attraction. It also includes indicators relating to the impact of different business groups, so local businesses, for SMEs, and also social enterprises, which we know play a really crucial role in the delivery of an event, and especially some of that wider event-related programming. On the social side, you know, the social impact is often one of the most talked about areas of impact, but also often one of the most challenging areas to capture, right? And so, for example, how can cultural events encourage greater cultural participation? How can we measure the impact of business events on new partnerships and new projects? How can sporting events encourage an increase in physical activity levels? I'm sure our friend Fiona Ball from WHO will touch on this a lot more in the panel later on. But of course, events aren't just about promoting participation. They also have a whole range of impacts on health and well-being, on pride in place, which, for example, capitals of culture are well known to be incredibly helpful for, as well as promoting more inclusive societies. And then finally, and we're all increasingly aware of the environmental impacts that events can have in relation to carbon footprint, to waste generation, pollution. And these impacts need to be accurately measured so that events can improve their practices as we respond to the climate emergency. But events can also have a positive impact in this area. So, for example, by promoting and encouraging more sustainable behaviours, more pro-environmental behaviours, as well as by implementing sustainable sourcing strategies and through the contracting that they enact. So in the interest of time, I will stop here, but I will leave you with a slide and to say that you can find out more about how these indicators can be incorporated into your events and what are some of the good practice around impact measurement in the 2 guides, which are out now. Thanks very much.
Great. Thank you so much, Martha. And I think, for those who are listening in here, there's a lot of really interesting detail also in the guide on real practical elements of how to go about measuring, what kind of pitfalls to avoid as you're trying to measure them. And also just thinking about what elements you need to take into account, because it can be rather daunting, some of the quantitative considerations in measuring impact. But I think as Martha pointed out, some of the interesting learnings also come from the stories behind and this theory of change that you set up as you're looking at the impacts, and that really helps tell the story. So thank you so much again, Martha. I'm going to turn now to Tanya Braga, and Tanya is head of Olympic Games Impact and Legacy. You live and breathe these questions every day in your work, and you've seen many different events over the years and have been on different sides of the fence, I think, in helping to promote legacy and impact. So I turn it over to you for a few comments as one of our lead partners then on this report. And thanks again for your support.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Martha, and congratulations for the great work that has been concluding, and it was a pleasure to give a small contribution, to participate during the different rounds of consultation along these 2 past years. So it's a pleasure to be here with you today and to see this work published. So starting, why do we need solid impact metrics for major global events? I think there are 4 main reasons why. The first, as was mentioned by Marta, we need support for planning and execution, and it's very difficult to do it if we don't know where we are. And having solid impact metrics help us to understand if the implementation, if the practice is going the same size of the initial vision, or if corrections of need to be applied in the middle of the journey. But also it's a major thing on transparency and accountability. I think we live in a moment that the world is calling for more transparency, more accountability, and major events cannot be outside of this trend. At least for those in Europe, I think it's a big discussion now with the new directive for private companies. Governments have already been asked to be more transparent, and events also have this duty in front of society to be transparent. Another point is to have a solid basis for communication. It's important to communicate based on facts and figures and things we can prove, and not just on ideas and plans and what will happen in the future. And the 4th important part, I think it was mentioned as well by both Karen and Marta, it's around learning and knowledge transfer. This is something really important in the events world, global events, that you learn with the mistakes, that you learn with the things you did right. And talking about learning about mistakes, I think we learned with our mistakes. We had beforehand, until 2017, a very, very complex study of impact. And we learned by that the result was to have kind of reports of 5, even 600 pages that no one had the time and the attention span to read. We asked the organizing committees to do these long reports where without a clear theory of change and causality with the games. And I think we learned after trying to apply this for a few games editions that it didn't work. And it was not good to do things like that on our own. That the best thing was to partner with others, to have an industry-wide framework that was built and validated through a large consultation process by a credible organization. And now we see the result of this dream that was both a dream at the time becoming reality. So we're really happy to see this work of OECD coming to fruition, to count on the expertise of OECD and the expertise of all the experts they mobilized during this time, and to see this industry-wide effort. I think we have much more in common if we look at sport, cultural and business events than what we can imagine. So I think this work also show that we have a lot in common and that we can help each other. To conclude, just to say how the IOC is embracing the OECD guidelines, we're embracing it very strong. Paris 2024, it's already using this on their evaluation process. And for the next Olympic Games, we have put a clause on our contract, our main contract with a host, that is the Olympic host contract, that asks for evaluation and reporting following those guidelines. So we're really pleased to have this work ready, and we are embracing this effort from now on. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tanya, and helping to also contribute to this broader body for the international community, not only for the Olympics, which I guess contractually now will be one of the elements, but also just for the broader scale of global events around the world, and helping to learn and build on these different knowledge sharing and impact measurement efforts that everyone's taking. So now we're going to turn to our panel, and we'll get into a little bit more of the kind of how they're doing it and what we need to think about. So just to present them quickly, and then we'll do a first round where each intervenes, and then we'll have a more group discussion. So again, don't hesitate if you would like to ask questions, and then we can ask of our different speakers. And also I see some questions are starting to come in for Martha about the guide itself, and we'd be happy to answer those live as well. So we have with us Marie Barzac, who is the Director of Impact and Legacy of Paris 2024, getting very close, one more year. We have Fiona Bull, Head of the Physical Activity Unit of the World Health Organization. Welcome, Fiona. We have Kai Hattendorf, the Managing Director, CEO of the Global Association of the Exhibition Industry, UFI. We have Kate Levin, who is a principal at Bloomberg Associates. And Philip Mueller-Wirth, who is chief of the sports section, the Sector for Social and Human Sciences at UNESCO. So welcome to all for this discussion. I'm going to start first with Marie, and Tanya just alluded to the fact that you're actually starting to already apply some of these indicators. And I think we have a little element in the report that kind of shows for people to see exactly how you're linking up to some of these core indicators that we're suggesting based on this international consultation. Tell us, you've got a bold impact and legacy strategy. Could you tell us a little bit about how you developed the strategy, and what are the main impacts that you are seeking to achieve by hosting the Summer Olympics next year? Marie?
Thank you, Karen. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. And I would like firstly to thank the OECD and the IOC for their support in this challenge of the evaluation of the impact of our strategy, because it's not easy. We are not experts, and we are at the right moment, I think, with the production of your recommendation. It's very useful for us to go ahead in this topic. So for Paris 2024, it is a key issue because we really believe that the Games brings opportunity for all, and we really want our Games to be useful for our own population, for the French population. We also believe that sport can change lives, and we need to prove it to our population. It is clearly in our DNA. I would like to come back to one thing that has been said by Marta. It is also very important to think about this topic during the bid phase. And this is what we have done, because we really build our DNA during the bid phase, and we continue during the OCOC phase. But it's important to think about that topic from the very beginning and very early in the process. So organizing spectacular games is, of course, necessary, but it's very important to also organize responsible game, socially responsible, economically responsible, and responsible also for the environment, of course. We really want that the games benefit to a larger population by addressing key societal issues such as education, inclusion, health, equality, solidarity. And for all of those topics, we decided to launch some programs. Legacy for us played a very important role, as I said. We have a concept of the organization of the Games built on very few building for the organization of the Games. We are going to use 95% of existing venues or temporary venues. It means that we drastically reduce our carbon print, first effect, and second effect, we have more money to launch societal programs and social and economical programs. So that's also something very important in the DNA of the project. What we have done also is very early in the project, as I said, in 2019, our board adopted our strategy and dedicated also a budget for this strategy. This is very key because at the end of the day, if you don't have money to evaluate the work you have done, well, you can't prove that your games are useful or you can prove your positive impact. So one of a key recommendation is also to save money for that and time also, because you need time to make this evaluation process efficient and time to also deliver the programs. To maximize the effect and the impact of the programs, you need time to launch the program. We also engage a large stakeholder family through this program, because to be positive, to generate a positive impact in a long-term perspective, you also need to engage stakeholders that will continue after you to set up those programs, to continue to deliver those programs you have launched during the organization of the Games. This is also something very important. So from the very beginning also, we discussed with the stakeholders to say, okay, Paris 2024 is launching the program, but seek that after the Games, you will continue this process. We also decided to have some key emblematic programs that are very easy to talk and easy to prove that they are that they have a positive impact. I will give you 3 examples. One is this program for the kids in order to tackle the sedentarity of the kids in France. It's 30 minutes of physical activity at school every day. This program has been launched by Paris 2024 with the support of the Ministry of Education, and now it is implemented in all schools in France. But at the very beginning, we were in a experimental phase, and because it was very early in the process, we have time to implement it now everywhere in France. Second emblematic program is 1-2-3 Swim, which is a program that offers opportunities to learn to swim to kids during summer, kids in deprived area where kids are not the opportunity to go on holidays. And this program is linked to the only sport venue we built. It is an aquatic center, and we wanted to learn to swim for the kids that after the Games will benefit from this aquatic center. So there will not only be an aquatic center in Seine-Saint-Denis, but also kids that learn to swim and can use this aquatic center. And another emblematic program concerns the people away from employment. We have a program called From Stadium to Employment that's using sports to help people to get a job through sports. It is very important to have those emblematic programs again to talk to the population very easily. We also created an endowment fund to finance those who are every day are generating social innovations through sports. It is also important to explain that our Games are only counting on the people that every day are using sports for social innovation. And we are supporting those who are acting every day. Paris 2024 is not inventing the wheel. We also are encouraging those who are doing the job before us and that continue to do the job after us. To answer your question, something very important is also to tackle the challenge of the proof, how to be very transparent in the results, We need to be rigorously independent and clear on the production of our evaluation studies. This is very important. And we need to have an evaluative approach that involves collaborative construction and drawing inspiration for best practice and higher standards. That's how the support of OECD and the IOC was important. One key element is also to be able to collect the data. It is also very important to have the figures, as Tanya said, facts, figures, objective results to feed, in fact, the evaluation process. And that we have done this very early in the project, because if you realize that just 1 year after the end, you can't collect the data of 3 years before. So this is also very key to have this method to collect the data from the very beginning when you launch the program. Again, the method we use was firstly to choose the program we want to launch, was to launch a study, to have the picture of the situation. We want to target, as I said, the sedentarity of the kid, but what is the situation in 2019, in order to prove in 2024 that there is a positive evolution. So having a first study to make the picture, launch the program, and after save money for the evaluation of the program. That's what we've done for the 30 minutes of physical activity, as I said, and we launched very 2 weeks ago an evaluation, an impact study to evaluate the experimentation of the 30 minutes of physical activity in the region where we launched the program. And the Ministry of Education will be inspired and decided to adopt our methodology to make the global impact study for all schools in France in terms of evaluation of these programs at the national level this time. So it's also interesting to use the OCOG as an experimentation also process in terms also of evaluation. So that's perhaps the first answers I can share with you.
Great, thank you so much, Marie. And I know that it's definitely having this long-term transformational change. I know, in schools, kids might have, in the city, they might have physical education 2 hours in one day for the whole week. Well, that doesn't necessarily help with the sort of daily rhythm of physical activity. So I know that one of the things I also wanted to highlight was, for example, you've put an emphasis on social enterprises as well in the procurement, which is something that is relatively new and innovative, and especially in France, where this is a topic that has become also a hot political issue as well, and trying to ensure that we who is supplying for these different events can have a positive social impact as well through the procurement. So lots of exciting things, and I'm sure there'll be more questions coming up in the full round. So I think now I'll turn to Fiona Bull. So you've been doing a lot of work in trying to get the entire world to be more physically active. In fact, you recently, with the OECD and colleagues in another group, launched a report, Step Up, about tackling the burden of insufficient physical activity in Europe in this case, but I know you're working globally to make that happen. And of course, these global events, that's one of the main impacts they want to have when it's a sporting event, is increasing sports participation and as well physical activity. So you've been around the world, you've seen this. What do you think we need to do to better achieve this impact that everyone is trying to get out of these sporting global events?
Well, thank you very much indeed, Karen, and a very good afternoon to everyone and the panelists. This is an important day, and I'd like to extend my congratulations to OECD and the IOC for the launch of this significant step forward and platform for which all of us can work from to meet our shared goals and to do better practice in this space of achieving the outcomes from mega events that have already been spoken about. So a big thank you and congratulations for the process as well. I think the expertise, the consultation and deliberations, because as Martha outlined, that there's methodological issues and challenges, and then there's granular details about what measures and that indicator set. And the two documents really provide us with both insight and where we can start from. So your question about what can we do and what's needed, well, firstly, let me just backdrop that WHO has a keen and important interest in this area, because mega events are places where people can enhance their health, have the opportunity to enhance their health, and mega events often claim health and well-being as one of the outcomes, contributing to social and well-being in many ways. But materializing that, realizing that, capturing that is in fact not been done so well, to be polite, or missing, to be more blunt. We need to show that these events and show how. And so the evaluation frameworks and the tools and the direction that these two documents provide are critical. Put it simply, everyone should use these now. And I'm very delighted to hear the examples of using this. Having the evidence is critical, because then we can see and learn from it. And I think, Martha, you also outlined that we have to have common indicators so we can compare, but we also need to make sure we're measuring things the same way. Otherwise, we're speaking a language, but measuring differently. So it gets quite complicated. When do you measure? What do you measure? How do you measure? Well, all these questions were answered and issues raised in the two documents. And focusing specifically on one of the biggest claims made, that sport mega events can increase sports participation and physical activity. We share that ambition at WHO and contributing to that with guidance and collaborations. But the measurement of it is and the evaluation is critical. I think we've got the opportunity going forward to apply these and learn from them. I really endorse the idea that there's quantitative and qualitative. They are different and they both have value. I think the timeframes, and just listening to the experience of Paris 2024, it's not just at the event. It's not just after the event. It could be a years or many years after. When should the 30 minutes be evaluated? In 1 year or 5 years? Maybe both. And so this is what I think the documents and the thinking that's really getting much more sophisticated now about how we do this and how we can turn and share this between events and between countries, but also, of course, to use this evidence for the investment. If I can finish by saying that this requires that long-term thinking. And the long-term thinking starts early, as has already been said, but I'd like to emphasize it. Beginning to think about what is the opportunities, what are the KPIs, the ambitions, and then stating them very, very clearly in the measurable way that these documents point to. Because once you've got that ambition articulated, the middle bit is that theory of change. What are you going to do to achieve it? And measuring all the bits on the way. We may have really good idea, but implementation failure. We may have excellent implementation, but evaluation failure. What we're striving for is implement well and evaluate well, so that we can create the ecosystem around these, particularly sport mega events, but of course the cultural events as well often have contributions to health and well-being. So I really welcome this. It's not the answer. I think it's just the beginning, because now we've got the tools to work from, apply, and I really call for us continuing the conversation and sharing learnings going forward from different size events and different types of events, so that we can show application and refine this as needed. And thank you for the opportunity to join the panel. Back to you, Karen.
Great, thank you so much, Fiona. Before I pass the ball to our next intervener, just wanted to ask you a little bit on if you could just help people understand what are the benefits of increased physical activity? Because I think one of the things that helps us make all of this real is this increases longevity. People live longer, they improve their mental health, they improve their physical health. Tell us a little bit about what the World Health Organization is seeking to achieve by improving physical activity, which many of these global events are also trying to have as a positive impact.
Well, thank you, Karen. You know, that's my favorite question. So the benefits of physical activity through sport, walking, cycling, play, active recreation are mental, social, and physical. The physical is head to toe. Critically, and obviously, people are well aware of the cardiovascular benefits, and that links through to hypertension and diabetes, these diseases that can be prevented and delayed and supported through treatment. The mental health, important across all ages, and COVID, of course, has shown us that with our movement restricted. All of us have experienced that, but there are positive benefits from engaging in physical activity. In the very short term, we feel better directly after, but in the longer term, we can delay onset of dementia, improve cognitive and higher processing functions like learning and memory that we're all very keen to maintain as we age, and then the social benefits by being engaged in activity and sports. So it's an extensive list summarized in our global action plan, summarized in global guidance, and supported by strong evidence of the benefits of being active regularly. And with mega events of all sorts, and particularly sports, you know, it gets attention. It raises interest and enthusiasm, and what we're trying to do and encourage all to do is translate that energy, enthusiasm and motivation into the actions, because regretfully 28% of adult population, 80% of adolescent populations are not active, and it's 1 in 3 women, 1 in 4 men, can be a lot higher in many countries, up to 1 in 2. So the challenge is to reach the people who are least active, to support everyone being more active every day. And there's real health gains if we achieve that. And currently there's real health losses if we continue as we are. Thank you, Karen.
Great, thanks, Fiona. So really just a call for everyone to realize that this can be big if we actually can make the kind of changes that Marie was talking about, where you get kids to actually practice every day, get a routine going, get used to it, so that later, you know, for the next decades that follow, we've had that lasting impact. So thank you so much, Fiona. I'm going to turn now to Kai Hattendorf. And Kai, as the director of the Global Association of the Exhibition Industry, UFI, you're helping to organize lots of different events. And you're also in particular looking at the environmental impacts. That's one of the areas that you've also been focusing on in developing the Net Zero Carbon Events Initiative. Maybe you could explain to us a little bit about UFI and a bit more about this work and what you see are the main challenges for events to become more environmentally sustainable. And thank you for joining us late in the evening out of Delhi. So.
Indeed. Thank you, Karen, and good evening from Delhi. And Fiona, thanks for reminding me that I still have to get my run in after this. Now, I also have to start by thanking the OECD for taking us on this journey. And it's been a really journey of exploration, working with the team and providing input from our side of the global events industry, the business events side. I'm very happy that global trade shows, global conferences are inside the spectrum of what is being shared and discussed today. As, the usual questions I always get on impact are about the economical impact. Obviously, if you build a trade show floor, trade takes place. It's obvious in the name, and these transactions drive economic growth. They also drive intellectual growth at the destination that is hosting the event, and so many other factors around that exchange of knowledge, ideas, that generation of innovation. Talking about this as part of my day job as UFI, as you said, the global trade body for the exhibitions industry. The exhibitions is about 1/3 of the global business events industry. Therefore, we are also part of an ecosystem of associations under the umbrella of the Joint Meetings Industry Council. There's always a bigger fish. In our case, it's the Joint Meetings Industry Council that unites various players alongside the various trajectories of the events sector. And with the Joint Meetings Industry Council, we launched an initiative called Net Zero Carbon Events in the run-up to COP26, the climate conference in Glasgow in 2021. It's 23 now, right? In 2021, when the host of that COP, Glasgow, actually asked, so where's our industry's plan to become net zero carbon? What are we as the events industry doing to achieve that? And it got us on a journey that we've been since that became the Net Zero Carbon Events Initiative, working with the UNFCCC, that part of the United Nations that oversees the implementation of the Paris Climate Accord and hosts these climate conferences at the end of every calendar year. And we went to Sharm el-Sheikh, COP27 last year in December. As events people know, there's no better deadline than an event, right? Colleagues in Paris, there's no better deadline to have everything ready than in time for the Olympics to start. And you have to be ready. And we went to Sharm el-Sheikh with a roadmap on how we as an industry can achieve to halve our greenhouse gas emissions by 2030 and become net zero carbon by 2050, the latest. These targets are aligned with the Paris Climate Accord and with many other industry initiatives around the world. And most crucially for everyone in the business event sector, with the climate targets that corporations are putting up on their journey to reduce their carbon footprints. They are the customers of the business event sectors. Same with the stakeholders around sports events or cultural events. Everybody's moving in the same direction. Every sector needs answers on how to get there. So you ask, what are the major challenges? Obviously, the biggest elephant in the room for every international event is the travel of people to attend the event. I'm in Delhi, and I took the plane to get me here for 2 days of meetings. So these 2 days of meetings better create a positive impact that is higher than the carbon cost. And in that analysis, ultimately, it doesn't matter whether we offset the travel or not, because the carbon is in the atmosphere that's caused by this flight. So the big conversation we need to have as the events industry about up to 80% of the carbon footprint is not really so much about things we can directly impact, the way we run our events, the way we organize it, the way we facilitate the exchange of information and trade on site, but how people get there and what people do while they're in the destination. So hospitality and travel are critical partners in this journey. And that's where, again, the UNFCCC comes in to facilitate the conversation. What we can directly impact as the sector is pretty much, and I'd like to revert back to some of the things that Marie said, the way you design your event, the way you design your venues and this infrastructure you utilize for the Paris 24 Olympics. By building on what is there, you are avoiding an additional impact on the carbon side. Same goes for events. If you can source your food and beverages locally, if you can use reusable stands rather than building single-use stands, there are so many low-hanging fruits that we as a sector can benefit from, that this will carry us to the first 50% of greenhouse gas emission reductions. Within the Net Zero Carbon Events Initiative, and it's referenced in the guides that you're releasing today, there are a number of operational work streams producing the best practices and the guidances on how to do that. And I think this is a good example where initiatives like this coming from one sector can then feed into initiatives like this one here and your guides from the OECD. Not everybody trying to answer the very same question, but figuring out where are groups working on the right implementation, where are groups working on the best example, where are groups working on the right way forward, and then combine that and cross-reference it so we can all walk in lockstep and we can all collaborate on getting to these intended aims much faster. I could go on forever, but I want to leave time for the conversations and discussions later on. So thank you again for having Ufi and having us here and for seeing the relevance of business events in this bigger spectrum. And let me hand back to you, Karen, for the next panelist.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Kai. And I think what you really also pointed out is let's get the big picture with some metrics to see where can we have the biggest impact, where can we address the low-hanging fruit, and then sort of sharing those lessons so that any kind of event, not only a business event, can benefit from the work that you've been doing in trying to understand how to get closer to net zero carbon events. I'm going to turn now.
Right, may I quickly jump in, because that this is so important. Fiona mentioned that in the best possible way. Plan what you want to measure and identify how you're going to measure it. We all know garbage in, garbage out. If we don't go through the exercise in the beginning to identify the metrics and the measurements, we won't be able to deliver a result. We will be able to sweet talk our ways out of it because we are smart, but we won't really deliver a result. So the most important work lies in the design in the beginning, and this is where right now half of the work in Net Zero Carbon goes in, to make sure we define the measurements and the metrics so that we can actually go and create something meaningful.
Great. So thanks. I guess a lot of people are all attesting to the importance of doing this early and upfront. It's not an afterthought if we want to make it happen. Thanks so much, Kai. I'm turning now to Kate DeLevin, Bloomberg Associates. Now, global events also include cultural events, and it can be an international film or music festival, a book fair, a cultural Olympiad, a capital of culture, or some other kinds of cultural activities. And Kate, you bring really a wealth of experience as Commissioner for New York City's Department of Cultural Affairs and working with Bloomberg with cities, many cities around the world, and also in particular on cultural issues. So I'd be really interested to understand how you think global cultural events can better contribute to local development, because we have many, but and there might be some achievements, but maybe there are things they could do more, better, differently. And also, how do we get people to think beyond the, I think as you referred to, the sort of beds and heads in the metrics, and in looking at how do we get this local impact from events with a culture focus. So Kate, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Karen. I think what, listening to my extraordinary colleagues on this call, I would say maybe the most useful framework for thinking about the contribution of culture is something that Mike Bloomberg used to say when he was mayor of New York, which is that culture defines a city in terms of economy, identity, and quality of life. And economic impact is something that cities and organizations are pretty used to counting in a fairly sophisticated way. But when it comes to culture, the issues of impact on identity and quality of life are more elusive. So I want to join everyone in thanking OECD for creating a more rigorous kind of template for looking at these issues and trying to emphasize the need for creating more standardization in how we do this, because culture in particular tends to be looked on as an outlier. And while it's making contributions to these things, the actual benefits, again, tend to be more qualitative and therefore harder to count. We have a phrase around here that probably won't translate very well, but it's that not everything that counts can be counted, and not everything that can be counted counts. So I think that's something to think about in framing the relationship of cultural events to this conversation. There's also a difference between nonprofit and for-profit events. And I guess the thing that I would stress is, particularly as we're looking at cities coming out of the pandemic and the issue of sort of resilience of cultural sectors, ironically, there's probably never been a higher value on the distinctness of different places based on their specific cultural and creative sectors. And there's a wonderful network, the World Cities Culture Forum, that has over 40 cities in it now, that does a great job of indexing the cultural life of each of these cities and how unique it is, and how the distribution is genuinely different city to city. But if people are going to hesitate about returning to work, the place that they live, and literally the 20-block radius of where they live, becomes that much more vivid. And figuring out, as Fiona said, what the short-term as well as long-term benefit of big events are to the organic cultural ecology of place matters that much more. I guess I think a couple of specific things that we have learned over the years about cultural events in particular, and in particular nonprofit ones, although it can extend to commercial ones as well, is that they really afford a unique template for community consultation. Doing a big cultural festival tends to involve multiple venues in lots of different kinds of neighborhoods, and getting the locals on board, much less making sure that you're hiring locally, is a very specific kind of requirement, but also can produce all kinds of muscle tone across larger civic activities. Hard to measure, but we see it again and again, that the relationships formed around big cultural events extend to other kinds of civic activities. The other thing that a number of people have stressed is the importance of baseline information. And again, around culture, and particularly this issue of civic identity and quality of life, harder to do. And studies of sentiment have now become, I think, more prevalent, and hopefully will help capture the specific benefit of cultural events. A phrase that was used in the OECD reports, psychic income, I think is a concept that also can benefit from wider proliferation and greater understanding. The kind of civic pride that cultural events can generate is really substantial. I think just by way of one and a half examples from my own experience to offer about this would be examples of big public art events. Because again, I think usually cultural events are thought of as festivals, but these are sort of unique because they require all kinds of civic investment, and the issue of how you count the benefits is, I think, particularly illustrative. So same artists, Jean-Claude and Christo, two examples. I had the privilege when I worked for the city of New York to help produce an exhibition called The Gates in Central Park in 2005. And again, we could count the economic impact, $254 million in spend in 16 days. We could count the number of visitors, 4 million. But the thing that we couldn't capture and was arguably the most valuable was the fact that that was really the first time after the tragedy of September 11th, when New York City was front and center in every form of media around the world for something that wasn't about war or death or conflict, but was about ratifying imagination. And from all kinds of people, it was a situation where no one was right, no one was wrong. There were no winners. People could like it, not like it. So the issue of social cohesion produced by that exhibition was extraordinary. Fast forward to 2021 and the Jean-Claude and Christo piece, Wrapping the Arc de Triomphe in Paris, similarly took place at a moment when it was really one of the first major civic events coming out of the pandemic that attracted people from all over the world. And the evaluation there, 6 million visitors, many of which were not from France. There's also calculation about spend that increased. And in some ways, most valuable, it was the pedestrian activity and exploration of the neighborhood, not only around the Arc de Triomphe, but in other areas of the city. So I guess what I would say overall, when it comes to evaluation, the importance of establishing a baseline so that those calculations can be made subsequently, but hopefully, and looking to OECD for leadership on this as well, as these frameworks develop, really trying to help the field figure out how to capture some of these sentiment issues, some of these civic pride issues, so that we can start establishing the capacity internationally to really capture what culture in particular, I think, brings to the table as a qualitative benefit to cities. So thank you so much, Karen. Back to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Kate. And it's a shame I can't show you. I actually have pictures of the gates that I took in 2005 here in my office. So just to show the continued positive psychic income that I'm getting from that exhibit almost 20 years ago. I think we have a few more minutes, but I first want to turn to also Philip Mueller-Wirth of UNESCO, Chief of the Sports Section. And again, you're coming back from Baku in Azerbaijan, where you just held your major international convening of ministers and senior officials responsible for physical education and sport. And one of the sort of results of this event is really a new Fit for Life label for major sports events as part of UNESCO's Fit for Life initiative. And so if you kind of take a step back and think about the impact of sport on economic and social development, as well as local development, when we think really about communities and places, where do you see the greatest needs in helping countries take this forward? Given all the potential positive benefits, what do we need to do to make those benefits a reality?
Hello, everyone. Very nice to meet you all. Thanks to OECD to bringing UNESCO to the table. Most of you have been in Baku with us last week. I'm very happy to meet Kate and Kai, who are the only ones I haven't met before, and I'm quite impressed by all the panelists' interventions. Congratulations, as by many others, for the fantastic work you did on the guides. Really very important process, first of all, but also outcome. And we definitely will continue working with you, OECD, to capitalize on the tremendous work that you have accomplished. You allow me to be a little big picture before I go down to the question, Fit for Life, what is it all about? It's about sport being underutilized, an underutilized solution to many contemporary problems we have, be it health, Fiona mentioned, the problems we have and the benefits of physical activity on physical well-being, and increasingly, of course, mental well-being being a major issue around the world. There's increasing inequalities around the world, and we know that sport can be a solution to overcoming these inequalities between countries and within countries and communities. And of course, as a UNESCO, we know very well about the educational benefits of sport in terms of citizenship, but also academic performance or attendance in educational institutions. The problem is that all these benefits of sport are not sufficiently activated, and Fit for Life is all about making the case for sport as a solution to non-sport stakeholders. Too often, we remain within the sport of development ecosystem and repeat ourselves how important sport can be, but it doesn't move the needle. What we need to do is having very robust data, both qualitative and quantitative data, that will bring non-sport stakeholders to the table at the national levels, other ministries than sport ministries, education, health, labor, social affairs. All these policymakers can use sport much more than they do right now and much better than they do right now. We need to bring on around the table development banks, development partners, more broadly speaking, and of course the business, because so far sport is mainly perceived as an elite sport investment and grassroots sport investments are neglected. And yet we start having the data that we need to reach out to these partners, and Baku and the Fit for Life Alliance is a first move to bring all these stakeholders together. As I said, data is the name of the game, because that's the only language people will understand and will incite them to start investing in sport. And this is one of the messages we learned over the last years. We have to very closely connect the measurement discussion to the investment discussion. No one is keen per se on measuring, but everyone is keen on investments. And if we bring these things together, we have much broader audiences and interest and buy-in, a word that was used previously. I would extend that word to ownership. And here we come to the subject matter of today. I think it's very much about ownership of these events, first and foremost by the local populations. Then, of course, by sport policymakers. We see in UNESCO major sport events as a part of a national sport for development strategy. They are catalysts in many ways, and a lot of things have been mentioned, but the vision that should underlie the bid to host these events and the planning of these events should be a long-term vision. It has been said by others, to use sport much more systematically for national development priorities. And major sport events can play a very important role in doing so. And if we manage, thanks to the work that we have started in OECD through a UNESCO label, to showcase and to illustrate how the organization of major sport events can advance national development objectives, we will have more countries bidding, right? And I think that's a concern we have. We're 193 member states, and this is not just about a few countries who can afford the big mega events, but it's about making the organization of these events relevant for our member states and not only for sport ministers. And so we have worked with Santiago 23, with Paris 24. Of course, Marie was in Baku, with Dakar 26, with the African Football Nations Cup in 23. And the message was very similar from all of them, that they would appreciate a reference that they can turn to when they start to making the case for organizing these sport events in their own countries. It's not an evaluation issue mainly. It is an issue of placing these events amongst those stakeholders who don't own them sufficiently right now. And so I believe we are on the right track with the work you have been doing. The methodologies are very solid, and we will work with our member states to come to Paris 24 to be able to showcase the tremendous work Marie and her team and her colleagues are doing in ensuring not just a legacy, but a lasting impact of these games in social terms, in environmental terms, in particular, in an objective framework, because that is what our member states will buy. And I think, again, you have done a tremendous work in OECD to advance us on this journey.
Thank you so much, Philip. And again, congratulations on raising the awareness and having this Fit for Life label to help really promote the positive impacts of these big sports events. I know we only have a couple minutes left, so just wanted to flag, we did get a number of questions in the question and answer tab, and several of them have already been answered. So just to say, yes, the recording will be available. Yes, the guides do address a number of the different questions about tools and methods to measure the indicators. Paris is the first one to use it because they were able to see some of the drafts and start applying quickly. But again, we hope many others will pick it up. We also want to flag that, of course, many other tools are out there, and one of the goals is to kind of bring the best of, and also to help concentrate a bit attention on some of these core indicators. But I see other interesting questions about different elements of the sort of the nature of the statistics, et cetera, that we'll be happy to also answer in more detail, or check it out in the guides. But before we do close, I did want to just ask if each one of the panelists wanted to say, a sort of a key lesson or a key takeaway from their work that they would want to share with others. In particular, a learning point that helped them as they saw the sort of theory of change and the intended impacts they wanted to have. It's something that kind of got in the way, but they were able to address and fix in order to focus on the positive impacts they wanted to achieve. So sometimes these learnings of what didn't go, what was as planned, can be extremely helpful for others as they think and plan their events. So I don't know if anyone wants to jump in on that front.
I can share some experience of Paris. One quick question we had to answer was to define in our programs which programs is accelerated by the games and which programs are initiated by the games. And this question is not so easy. We had lots of discussion with Tanya on that, and it is very important when we need after to evaluate and to measure and to secure your impact after that. So this question, you need time to answer it and to discuss it also with your stakeholders. It is not an easy question, and you have to think about that very early in the process. This is one of my advice. Another advice perhaps is also, it's what we have done. We decided to set up an independent committee about evaluation with experts, independent experts, French experts, but also international experts, to help us, to challenge us also, and to support our method of evaluation. It is also very important at the end of the day, because, you know, the media are not so easy sometimes, and it's not also easy to make our own promotion. And sometimes it's also easy that the media can address a question to experts, and they have a more objective speech and explanations than the Paris 2024. Of course, we believe that we are fantastic, and the media don't believe us, but they probably will believe the experts. This is what we bet, and we will see if it works. But anyway, we have also already a benefit because they are very helping us in the long process of this evaluation. So this is perhaps two of my advices.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Marie. Anyone else want to jump in on that?
I'll jump in with just a very briefly, given time limitations. I think as a question has just been posted in the chat box, we still need to call upwards and sideways for the importance of investing in the long-term impact and evaluating the long-term impact. So there's an advocacy, and my learning from having brought a group of different sports together is the power of sharing between sports and between events, so that the knowledge of practice as well as the theory and tools can actually be shared. And sometimes that's behind closed doors, because it's what didn't work is as important as what did work. And we look forward to convening and contributing to those kind of peer-to-peer learning and global sharing, because it's vital. Thank you.
Thanks, Fiona. Philip, I think you wanted to jump in.
Yeah, just very quickly, I think the longer term impact, the lasting impact beyond the legacy programs themselves very much relies on governance. The games and these events are very often the moment where the different stakeholders come together that normally don't go together, but they dissolve very often once these events are finished. And I think we should look into the sustained governance, not just of top-down decision makers, but also the participatory process that you put in place in Paris and elsewhere to last themselves as mechanisms.
If I may add on that, obviously the business event side has an advantage here, as a business event is usually a recurring event. It may travel the world, or it may return to the same location year after year. So you have that kind of legacy aspect built in, and you can build your timelines of delivery against legacy targets. And it might be worth exploring in the ongoing work whether some of these mechanics that drive these mid to long-term legacy projects from the business event side can be adopted in the cultural events or sports event side, and what structure is essentially needed to remain in place when the project structure is being disassembled.
Thanks so much, Kai. Does anyone else want to jump in on that, or any other sort of final reflections you want to make before we close out this webinar?
Just quickly, Karen, and not to sort of be an apostate here, I completely believe and agree with all the comments about having a theory of change as part of evaluation. But what we have learned again and again is to be alert to things that don't fit the theory of change. And, you know, for example, what we often find with cultural events is increasingly there's a huge proliferation online, often from people who can't attend but become very engaged with something. I don't know that there's a genuine understanding yet of what to do about that. Should there be some effort to monetize it? Should it just, not just, but should it be considered a category that itself needs to be evaluated and better understood? In some ways, is it the most valuable offshoot of something that people have created some kind of memory that they consider precious enough to pass around, whether or not they saw something in person? So I would just say absolutely theory of change, but absolute alertness to things that may not fit, and to try not to shoehorn them in, but to recognize them as other potential strands of value or feedback or even critique. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Kate. And I think that also highlights the importance of the behavioral insights that if we have this theory of change, but we need to also confront it with what are the things that are assumed in this theory, and what maybe in the reality is a different situation, and how do people respond maybe differently. And I think also the inclusion element in the way that we think about putting together the indicators, who's consulted, who's helping to collect, also I know came up as a very political issue as well, of especially different forms of communities. And Marie maybe didn't mention this as much in her opening, but a big emphasis in Paris is actually on neighborhoods that are economically traditionally disadvantaged. And so the sort of different elements of inclusion of different types of people, different types of participants, different sites, online sites versus in-person sites, I think are all super important that we also need to take into account as we go forward. And I see in one of the comments even thinking about how artificial intelligence needs to be taken into account. So I think we're unfortunately at sort of closing, even though I'd love to keep going for, to be quite honest, hours, because all of the discussion is super interesting. And I think it's really, as was mentioned, the sort of the end of the beginning, if you will. So there's still a lot more to do. So we have some different international guides. Now we have, I think, these OECD guides that will help further the debate, but look forward to working collectively and globally to take this forward, this body of knowledge on what works, what doesn't work, how can we start to get a sense of where these impacts are happening and what gets in the way when people try to make these impacts happen. The guides are online. There's a number of other resources online as well in their different entities, and I think some of them have been flagged in the chat. On the OECD website, you can get information on the recommendation, on the implementation toolkit, as well as these guides. Colleagues in other parts of the OECD are also working on guidance on infrastructure risks associated with Olympics that will be available later this summer. Countries that are interested in adhering to the OECD recommendation, don't hesitate to get in touch. And we, of course, are pleased to continue to support countries and cities in helping to shape their strategies and apply these kinds of guides and toolkits. So those who are interested, don't hesitate to reach out to us here at the OECD, and look forward also for those of us in the Northern Hemisphere who are maybe going on summer vacation, but I see from around the world the number of participants from really a truly global audience. But in September, after our Northern Hemisphere summer, there are a number of different events you might want to join in on as part of our work on social economy. One on social procurement, which again is one of the elements that comes out of these global events. Another on the role of social economy in refugees. And I know that's also a very important element in a number of different global events, and the use of sports, for example, and culture in refugee inclusion, and many other activities that we'll have. So thanks again for tuning into this discussion today. Thanks again to all of the esteemed panelists who brought their expertise. Thanks again to Martha and also Irene Bazile, who helped produce the guides, and look forward to continuing the conversation as we go forward. Thanks to everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Happy afternoon, evening, night.